students, how are you? I hope all are you good. Welcome back to another class. Today let me start English chapter number 8, The Adventure of the Speckled Band. It was early in April in the year 83 that I woke one morning to find Sherlock Holmes standing fully dressed by the side of my bed. Very sorry to knock you up, Watson. A young lady has arrived to insist upon seeing me. I presume I presume that it is something very pressing. Okay, a lady dressed in black and heavily veiled who had been sitting in the window rose as we entered. Good morning, madam. Good morning, madam, said Holmes cheerily. My name is Sherlock Holmes. This is my intimate friend and associate Dr. Watson, before whom you can speak as freely as before me. Okay, I observe that you are shivering. I shall order some hot coffee. It is not cold which makes my shiver, said the woman in a low voice, changing her seat as requested. What then? It is fear. Mr. Holmes, it is Tarrant. She raised her veil as she spoke, and we could her face all drawn and grey, with restless, frightened eyes like those of some hunted animal. You must not fear, said he shootingly. We shall soon set matters right, I have no doubt. Oh, sir, do you not think that it would help me? I am all attention, madam. My name is Helen Stoner, and I am living with my stepfather, Dr. Royal. When Dr. Earl was in India, he married my mother, Mrs. Stoner, a young widow of Major General Stoner. My sister Julia and I were twins, and we were only 2 years old at the time of my mother's remarriage. She had a considerable sum of money, not less than £1,000 a year, and this she bequeathed to Dr. Roylott entirely while we resided with him, with a provision that a certain annual sum should be allowed to each of us in the event of our marriage. Shortly after our return to England, my mother died. A terrible change came over our stepfather. About this time, instead of making friends and exchanging visits with our neighbors, he indulged in ferocious quarrels with whoever might cross his path. He had no friends at all save the wandering gypsies who he would give leave to encamp upon his land. He has a passion also for Indian animals, and he has at this moment a cheetah and a baboon which wander freely over his ground and are feared by the villagers almost as much as their master. You can imagine from what I say that my poor sister Julia and I had no great pleasure in our lives. No servant would stay with us, and for a long time we did all the work of the house. She was but 30 at the time of her death. Your sister is dead? Then I wish to speak to you about her death. Julia met a half-pay major of Marines at Christmas, to whom she became engaged. My stepfather learned of the engagement and offered no objection to the marriage, but within a fortnight of the day which had been fixed for the wedding, the terrible event occurred which has uh, deprived me of my only companion. That fatal night, Dr. Roylott had gone to his room early. She left her room, therefore, and came into mine, where she sat for some time chatting about her approaching wedding. At 11 o'clock, she rose to leave me, but she paused at the door and looked back. Tell me, Helen, said she, have you ever heard anyone whistle in the dead of the night? Certainly not, but why? Because during the last few nights, I have always about 3 in the morning heard a low, clear whistle. I am a light sleeper, and it has awakened me. I cannot tell where it came from, perhaps from the next room, perhaps from the lawn. She smiled back at me, closed my door, and a few moments later, I heard her key turn in the lock. I could not sleep that night. A vague feeling of impending misfortune impressed me. My sister and I, you will recollect, were twins, and you know how subtle are the links which bind two souls Two souls which are so closely allied. It was a wild night. The wind was blowing outside, and the rain was beating and splashing against the window. Suddenly, amid all the hubbub of the gale, there burst forth the wild scream of terrified woman. I knew that it is by my sister's voice. I sprang from my bed, wrapped a shawl around me, and rushed into the corridor. As I opened my door, I seemed to hear a low whistle, such as my sister described, and a few moments later, a changing sound, as if a mass of metal had fallen. As I ran down the passage, my sister's door was unlocked and revolved slowly upon its hinges. I started it at it horror stricken, not knowing what was about to issue from it. By the light of the corridor lamp, I saw my sister appear at the opening, her face blanched with terror, her hands groping for help, her whole figure swinging to and fro like that of a drunkard. I ran to her and threw my arms round her, but at that moment her knees seemed to give way and she fell to the ground. She writhed as one who is in terrible pain, and her limbs were dreadfully convulsed. At first, I thought that she had not recognized me, but as I bent over her, she suddenly shrieked out in a voice which I shall never forget. Oh my God, Helen, it was a bang. The speckled band. There was something else which she would fain have said, and she stabbed with her finger into the air in the direction of the doctor's room. But a fresh convulsion seized her and choked her words, and she slowly sank and died without having recovered her consciousness. Such was the dreadful end of my beloved sister. What is was it poison? The doctors examined her for it, but without success. Oh, and what did you gather from this allusion to a band, a speckled bat? Sometimes I have thought that it was merely the void talk of delirium, sometimes that it may have referred to some band of people, perhaps to these very gypsies in the plantation, whom shook his head like a man who is far from being satisfied. These are very deep water, said he. Pray go on with your narrative. A month ago, a dear friend, whom I have known for many years, has done me the honor to ask my hand in marriage. His name is Amitek Percy Amite. My stepfather has offered no opposition to the match. 2 days ago, some repairs were started in the west wing of the building, so that I have had to move into the chamber in which my sister died, and to sleep in the very bed in which she slept. Imagine then my thrill of terror when last night, as I lay awake thinking over her terrible fate, I suddenly hear in the silence of the night the loop whistle which had been the hell of her own death. I sprang up and lit the lamp, but nothing was to be seen in the room. कुछ भी नहीं दिखाई दिया room की. I was too shaken to go to bed again, however, so I dressed, and as soon as it was daylight, I came with the one object of seeing you and I asking your advice. This is a very deep business, he said at last. There are 1,000 details which I should desire to know before I decide upon a course of action, yet we have not a moment to lose. If we were to come to Stoke Moran today, would it be possible for us to see over these rooms without the knowledge of your stepfather? It is probable, as my stepfather will be away all the day. Excellent, then Watson and I will soon be there. She bowed and took leave. Sherlock Holmes went out for some walk and was soon back looking serious. Once they set out, he said, I have seen the will of the deceased wife. Said he, it is evident from the will that if both girls had married, their stepfather would have had a mere pittance. My morning's work has not been wasted, since it has proved that he has the very strongest motive for standing in the way of anything of the sort. We soon reached our destination. Our client of the morning had hurried forward to meet us with a face which spoke her joy. All has turned out splendidly. Dr. Roylott has gone to town, and it is unlikely that he will be back before evening. Now we must make the best use of our time. So kindly take us at once to the rooms which we are to examine. Where does the bell communicate with? Entering the room, he asked at last, pointing to a thick bell rope which hung down beside the bed. The tassel actually lying upon the pillow, he took the bell rope in his hand and gave it a brisk tug. Why, it's a dummy, said he. Won't it ring? No, it is not even attached to a wire. We can see now that it is fastened to a tube just above where the little opening for the ventilators is. What a fool. This builder must be to open a ventilator into another room when with the same trouble he might have communicated with the outside air. Dr. Grimsby Royler's chamber was larger than that of the stepdaughter, but was as plainly furnished a camp bed, an armchair, beside the bed a round table and a large iron, each and all of them with the keenest interest. What is in here? He asked, tapping the safe. My stepfather's business papers are in it. There isn't a fat in it, for example. No, what a strange idea. Well, look at this. He took up a small saucer of milk which stood on the top of it. No, we don't keep at cat, but there is a cheetah and a babu. Ah, yes, of course. Sulu, here is something interesting. The object which had caught his eye was a small dog lash hung on one corner of the bed. The lash, however, was furled upon itself and tied so as to make a loop of whipcord. The matter is too serious for any hesitation. Your life may depend upon your compliance. In the first place, both my friend and I must spend the night in your room. Both Miss Stoner and I gazed at him in astonishment. Let me explain. You must confine yourself to your room on pretense of a headache. When your stepfather comes back, then when you hear him retire for the night, you must open the window, put your lamp there as a signal to us, and then withdraw quietly into the room which you used to occupy. The rest you will leave in our hands. Goodbye, and be brave. We shall soon drive away the dangers that threaten me. Did you observe that the bed was clamped to the floor? The lady could not move her bed. It must always be in the same relative position to the ventilator and to the rope, or so we may call it, since it was clearly never made for a bell pull. Holmes, I cried, I seem to see dimly what you are hinting at. We are only just in time to prevent some subtle and horrible crime. About 9 o'clock, the light among the trees was extinguished and all was dark in the direction of the manor house. 2 hours passed slowly away, and then suddenly, just at the stroke of 11, a single bright light shone out right in front of us. That is our signal, said Holmes, springing to his feet. A moment later, we were out on the dark road, a chill wind blowing in our faces, and one yellow light twinkling in front of us. So the moon to guide us on our sunbreak errand. I soon found myself inside the bedroom. My companion noiselessly closed the shutters, moved the lamp onto the table, and cast his eyes round the room. All was as we had seen it in the daytime. Last sound would be fatal to our plans. He whispered. I nodded to show that I had heard. We must sit without light. I nodded again. Holmes had brought up a long thin cane, and this he placed upon the bed beside him. By it he laid the box of matches and the stump of a candle. Suddenly there was a momentary gleam of a light up in the direction of the ventilator. Then suddenly another sound became audible, a very gentle, soothing sound like that of a small jet of steam escaping continually from a kettle. The instant that we heard it, Holmes sprang from the bed, struck a match, and lashed furiously with his can at the bell pull. He had ceased to strike and was gazing up at the ventilator when suddenly there broke from the silence of the night the most horrible cry to which I have ever listened. It was a dreadful shriek. It struck both to our hearts, and I stood gazing at Holmes and yet me until the last echoes of it had died away into the silence from which it rose. What can it mean? I gasped. It means that it is all over. Holmes answered, "Take your pistol and we will enter Dr. Royal's room." It was a singular sight which met our eyes. Beside the table on the wooden chair sat Dr. Grimsby Roylott. Across his lap lay the long lash. His chin was cocked upward and his eyes were fixed in a dreadful wicked stare at the corner of the ceiling. So round his bow he had a peculiar yellow band with brownish speckles which seemed to be bound tightly round his head as being told he made me the some nod motion. The speckled band, whispered Booms. I took a step forward. In an instant, his strange headgear began to move and rear itself from among his hair. The square diamond-shaped head and puffed neck of a loathsome serpent. "It is a swamp adder," cried Holmes, "the deadliest snake in India. He has died within 10 seconds of being bitten. Violence does in truth recoil upon the violent, and the schemer falls into the pit which he digs for another." As he spoke, he drew the dog whip swiftly from the dead man's lap, and throwing the noose round the reptile's neck, he drew it from its horrid perch and carrying it at arm's length, threw it into the iron safe, which he closed upon it. We broke the sad news to the terrified girl and sent her to the care of her good aunt at Harrow. The slow process of official inquiry came to the conclusion that the doctor met his fate while indiscreetly playing with a dangerous pet. The little which I had yet to learn of the case was told me by Sherlock Holmes as we traveled back next day. According to Holmes, the ventilator and the bell rope caught his attention. The discovery that this was dummy and that the bed was clamped to the floor instantly gave rise to the suspicion that the hope was there as a bridge for something passing through the hole and coming to the bed. So the idea of a snake instantly offered to me, and when I coupled it with my knowledge that the doctor was furnished with a supply for creatures from India, I felt that I was probably on the right track. The idea of using a form of poison which could not possibly be discovered by any chemical test, and the rapidity with which such a poison would take effect was known to him. Then I thought of the whistle he had trained it, probably by the use of the milk which we saw, to return to him when someone he would put it through his ventilator with the through this ventilator with the certainty that it would crawl down the rope and land on the bed. It would bite the occupant and come back. An inspection of his chair showed me that he had been in the habit of standing all it, which of course would be necessary in order that he should reach the ventilator. The metallic clang heard by Miss Stoner was obviously caused by her stepfather, hastily closing the door of his safe upon its terrible occupant. Having once made up my mind, as soon as I hear the creature hiss, I instantly attacked it. With the result of driving it through the ventilator, some of the blows of my cane came home and roused its snakeish temper so that it flew upon the first person it saw. In this way, I am no doubt indirectly responsible for Dr. James Byer's death. So everyone, this chapter is in here. I hope you all are very well understand full chapter. So we will meet you the next class. Thank you everybody.